All right, this is a lesson about the building blocks of music and how music is math. This is a lesson more geared toward guitar players, and but it can be applied for just about anything. But the bottom line is it gives you some background information on the most basic scales and modes, and also like the relationship from one note to another, how they name chords, the intervals between them. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to on this grid here, I'm going to put all of the notes that can possibly be played in Western music, and I'm going to list them starting with the lowest one being C. Now, it doesn't matter if it's a high C or low C. I'm just going to start somewhere that we can hear. So C, and now I'm going to skip a line here because there's a whole step between C and D. And then there's a whole step between D and E, and then there's a half step between E and F. Now there's a whole step between F and G, and then there's a whole step between G and A whole step between A and B, and then a half step between B and C. And now we're back to the beginning because we C, D, F. And if we extended this onward into the next octave, and we'll figure out why that means what it means, we go C, D, E, F, G. We could go on into infinity in either direction, but we don't need to do that. Now, the important point then that we're trying to emphasize then is, okay, well, why is our things a certain way? Well, actually, if we put in the note that would lie in between here, we would call that C sharp, because sharp means bigger. And then, or we could name it D flat. So then we would have D sharp. Or it could also, the exact same note could be named E flat. It depends on the context, and we're going to talk about key signatures and context. But the bottom line is that these all have names, so there's F sharp, and then down here, if we wanted to name it G flat, we could. We could name this G sharp, and then we could also name it A flat, because flat means down from here. We'll talk about what a sharp and a flat is here in a second. So the next note up is A sharp, or sometimes called a B flat. It depends on the context. There's no sharps or flats between notes like B and C because they only have a half step difference. You can't fit anything between them. But we have, once again, C sharp, and we could do the same thing all the way through to the C sharps and flats here. But what I kind of want to illustrate then is, what did I just do and why is it important? Well, what we have here then is if we go and we say from C to D, that's going to be what is called a whole step. And then from D to E, there's a whole step. But what we notice is when we get to E and F, there is a half step. And same, but with F and G, whole step, whole step. And between A and B, there's a whole step. Between B and C, there's a half step. And so on. That pattern follows all the way through. Now, if we actually sit down and count the number of notes that we could actually play, and I'm going to move my pen color to black here a second. If we count these up, we'll see that there is exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then what happens is the 13th note, if we look it up here, the 13th note lining up with right here, is the exact same one that lines up over here on the first note. So basically we have a recurring pattern all the way into infinity each direction to the highest tone that can be ever played, which is infinitely high in frequency, all the way down to no frequency whatsoever on this end. So there's a pattern to things. But what makes this pattern even more compelling, and I'm going to translate the pattern all the way down here, so C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, sorry, F is right here, and then G. What you'll see then is this pattern kind of recurs, and I'm going to put borders along this pattern. And it forms patterns to things. And what we're going to notice right away, and I picked C on purpose as being the lowest one with a purpose. If I actually follow the named notes right here, and we go whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. If we go through and we follow that, what we're going to find is the first scale, known as the major scale, the one that sounds really pleasing to our ears, is the one that comes. So I'm going to put a number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They call this the octave because it would have been the eighth, so we call that the octave. So if we say something's one octave higher than this C, we're saying it's that C right there. And if we said, let's go another octave higher than this, we would go to the C that would appear way over here once we fit it onto the graph paper. If we said we want the C relative to this one that's 2 octaves higher, well then that means 1 octave, 2 octaves all the way over onto this side. But that's basically what it is. But this magical pattern that I'm highlighting right now is the building block for most of Western music right there, all the way back to the 8 or the 1, and we'll call it the 1 from here on out. And the reason we want to call it the 1, and we're also going to call it another word, we're going to call it by the root. Basically then, you see a pattern, and if we were to actually sing these notes, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and there you go. That is exactly what the basis of most Western music is based upon, is this pattern of a 1, a 2, a 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So that's the beginning of the building blocks of music, how music is math. This particular pattern is how most of the music in the world starts and ends. It shifts, obviously, and as we've become more advanced as musicians and we've realized the mathematical relationships and things, and really huge things changed with our guy Mozart and the music that he created in his time period, moving forward into other classical music like Beethoven, and the limits of this kind of stuff ended up getting pushed. And the instrumentation and the like. What's happened is new technologies, new people have come into the fore and seen this. They take this basic pattern and then they take it to levels that hitherto have not been used. We also notice some music is really repetitive and based on this the whole way, and we can talk about that in a different lesson. But basically, all of Western music is based upon the understanding that there's a total of 12 different notes, and that on the 13th note, it repeats back to the first. In addition to that, then, it's based upon this pattern of whole steps, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step pattern. And if we follow that pattern, we will get our do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and then we're back to do. So if you've listened to or watched the soundtrack for Sound of Music, or the movie The Sound of Music, that's what we're referring to. So that's basically some background on the building blocks of music. I'm going to talk about then why this pattern is important and how it fits into a lot of pop music in the very next lesson.